What would you do if the man who once promised you forever threw you away because you were barren, and then, just to humiliate you, invited you to his baby shower? Most women would have stayed home, broken, but not me. My name is Alicia, and instead of hiding, I showed up. Not in tears, not in shame, but in power. With my triplets by my side, I walked into that hall like a queen. Every eye turned, every phone went up, and in that moment, the man who thought I would be forgotten realized I was unforgettable. This isn't just a story of heartbreak. It's about how God can take your deepest pain and turn it into glory. And what happened that day left everyone speechless, including him. It all began 10 years ago in Atlanta, Georgia. My cousin was getting married, and I was honored to be her chief bridesmaid. I remember standing there in my pink satin dress, bouquet in my hands, feeling so happy for her. Weddings always have that magic. Music, laughter, the smell of roses in the air. I never knew that day would change the course of my entire life. That's when I first laid eyes on Jamal. He was one of the groomsmen. Tall, dark, with the kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. I can still remember how he walked with confidence, how his laughter filled the hall. He introduced himself, and we started talking. The conversation flowed so easily, as if we had known each other for years. By the end of the night, I was certain this wasn't just a casual meeting. Jamal asked for my number before I left, and I gave it to him without hesitation. We started texting, then calling, then meeting up. Every time we were together, he made me feel special, like I was the woman he had been waiting for. Within a year, he proposed, and I, blinded by love, said yes. Our wedding was beautiful. I wore the gown of my dreams, and Jamal looked at me with eyes full of love as we said our vows. I remember thinking, this is it, my happy ever after. Family clapped, friends cheered, and everyone kept saying we were the perfect couple. If only they knew what was coming. At first, our marriage was filled with laughter and dreams. Jamal would hold me close at night and whisper about the future, our dream house, our vacations, and most of all, the children we would have. I held on to those dreams tightly because I wanted to be everything he needed. But as months turned into years, the reality of my struggle began to weigh heavy. Every test I took came back negative. Every doctor's appointment ended with the same cold words. Not this time. I tried to smile through the pain, but inside, I felt like a piece of me was missing. At first, Jamal tried to be understanding. He told me we were still young, that we had plenty of time, but I could see the worry growing in his eyes. Slowly, his words of comfort turned into heavy silences. He no longer held my hand in public. At family gatherings, he avoided questions about when we would have children. The man who once promised to stand by me through everything began to distance himself, and I could feel his love slipping away. Then the hurtful words started. I remember one evening while I was setting the table, Jamal snapped. "What kind of wife can't give her husband a child? Do you think I married you for decoration?" My hands trembled as I placed the plates down. Tears blurred my vision, but I swallowed them because I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. Night after night, those words replayed in my head, echoing louder than any silence between us. Still, I refused to give up. I prayed harder, fasted longer, and searched for every possible solution. I visited specialists, drank bitter herbal teas, and followed every piece of advice people gave me. Eat this, it will open your womb. Pray this prayer for 40 days. I did it all. Every negative result crushed me deeper, but I believed that one day God would change my story. But Jamal had run out of patience. He stopped sleeping in our room and began coming home late at night. Then one day, I came home early from work and froze at the sight before me. Another woman sitting comfortably on my couch, laughing with him like she owned the place. My heart broke into pieces. The house we built together, the one filled with my prayers, had now become the stage for my humiliation. I confronted him, my voice trembling with rage and hurt. "Jamal, what is this? How could you do this to me?" But instead of shame, he smirked. He looked me in the eye and said words that nearly killed me inside. "This is a real woman, Alicia. I can't waste my life on you anymore." The woman laughed, as if my pain was entertainment. That night, I cried so hard I could barely breathe. Every fiber of my being told me to leave, but my heart, oh, my foolish heart, still clung to the vows I made, for better or for worse. I told myself maybe this was just a phase. Maybe if I prayed harder, he would return to me. So I stayed. I stayed even as the insults grew sharper and the laughter of his mistress echoed in my ears. I stayed because I believed in a marriage that no longer believed in me. The humiliation didn't end there. Jamal and his mistress treated me like a stranger in my own home. They made jokes at my expense, whispered behind my back, and sometimes even mocked me openly at the dinner table. I would serve food while they laughed together, and every laugh felt like a knife stabbing my heart. It was as if I no longer existed. I spent countless nights crying on the cold bathroom floor so they wouldn't hear me. I begged God, "Why me, Lord? Why did you give me a barren womb?" My tears felt endless, and sometimes I wondered if God even saw me. But even in my darkest hours, a small voice inside whispered, "Hold on, your story isn't over." One night, Jamal lost his temper completely. He packed my bags without warning and threw them outside. "Get out, Alicia. I don't want to see your face anymore," he shouted. I stood there in shock, watching the man I once loved throw away every vow we made as if it meant nothing. The neighbors watched quietly from their windows as I dragged my suitcase away in tears. With nowhere to go, I dragged my suitcase through the night until I arrived at my best friend Tasha's house. She opened her door and saw the brokenness written all over my face. Without a word, she pulled me into her arms and whispered, "You don't have to explain. You're safe here." For the first time in a long while, I felt like someone truly cared about me, not for what I could give, but for who I was. Living with Tasha gave me a chance to breathe again. Every morning, she would make me breakfast and remind me that I was more than my pain. She prayed with me, cried with me, and reminded me that God still had a plan. Her friendship became a lifeline, pulling me out of the darkness I had been drowning in. 5 months later, Tasha convinced me to attend a charity gala in Atlanta. At first, I resisted. I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere glamorous. But she insisted, saying, "Alicia, you need to step out and live again." I finally agreed, never knowing that night would completely change my destiny. The moment I walked into that ballroom, all eyes seemed to turn toward me. I wasn't the broken woman I had been. I had taken time to heal, to glow again. That's when I saw Brandon, a billionaire entrepreneur and philanthropist. His eyes locked on mine, and I could tell from that moment something powerful was about to unfold. Brandon walked over with confidence and introduced himself. His voice was calm but strong, and when he said, "You are the most beautiful woman in this room," my heart skipped a beat. For years, I had been overlooked, insulted, and humiliated. But in that moment, someone saw me, really saw me, and it felt like breathing fresh air after drowning. We talked the entire evening. Brandon wasn't interested in shallow conversation. He wanted to know me, my story, my dreams. And instead of judging me for my past, he admired my strength for surviving it. That night, for the first time in years, I went to bed with a smile on my face. Brandon began pursuing me seriously. He sent flowers to Tasha's house, called me every morning, and made me feel cherished. He never pushed me. He respected my healing process. Slowly, I realized this was not just a man. I had met a blessing wrapped in human form. With Brandon, I felt safe. I didn't have to pretend or hide my scars. One evening, I opened up and told him everything about Jamal, my pain, my humiliation, my infertility. I expected him to look at me differently, but instead, he held my hands and said, "Alicia, your past doesn't define your future. I see a queen in you." Months passed and our love grew stronger. Then, one magical evening, Brandon surprised me with a proposal. In front of close friends and family, he got down on one knee, pulled out a diamond ring that sparkled brighter than the stars, and asked me to be his wife. My heart screamed yes before my lips even moved. Our wedding was nothing short of a fairy tale. I walked down the aisle in a flowing white gown, but this time I wasn't walking into uncertainty. I was walking into destiny. Brandon's eyes glistened with love as we exchanged vows. This was everything I once dreamed of, except now it was real and it was mine. And then the miracle I thought would never happen, happened. A few months after our honeymoon, I found out I was pregnant. Not with one child, but with 3. I remember screaming when the doctor told me I was carrying triplets. God had answered my prayers beyond my wildest imagination. Brandon and I prepared for our babies with excitement. We decorated a nursery with 3 cribs painted in soft pastel colors and filled it with toys. Every night, Brandon would kneel by my stomach, talking to our unborn children, calling them blessings. For the first time, my home was filled with laughter instead of tears. When the day finally came, I gave birth to 2 beautiful girls and 1 handsome boy. Holding them in my arms, I cried tears of joy. All the years of humiliation, rejection, and pain melted away as I stared at their tiny faces. God had turned my mourning into dancing. Those first 2 years with my triplets were the sweetest moments of my life. Yes, it was exhausting, but every cry, every giggle, every tiny hand holding mine reminded me of God's faithfulness. Brandon never left my side. He was the perfect father and husband. My life had gone from ashes to beauty, and I thought the past was finally behind me. Then, out of nowhere, an invitation arrived in the mail. It was from Jamal, my ex-husband. He was hosting a baby shower with his new wife, and he wanted me there. At first, I thought it was a joke, but deep inside, I knew it was a cruel attempt to mock me. He wanted me to see what I could never give him. What he didn't know was that God had already rewritten my story. When I showed the invitation to Brandon, I expected him to be angry or tell me to throw it away. But instead, he looked at me calmly and said, "Alicia, you should go." I frowned, confused. Why would I go there just to be mocked? He smiled and held my hand. "Because you won't be mocked. You'll be honored. Let them see how God has blessed you." The day of the baby shower arrived, and Brandon made sure I stepped into that event like royalty. He surprised me with a white Lamborghini, polished so bright it reflected the sun. As I dressed in a flowing white gown, holding my triplets' little hands, I felt like a completely different woman from the one Jamal had thrown away years ago. When we pulled up to the baby shower venue, I noticed the guests turning their heads. Some whispered, others gasped. All eyes were on the Lamborghini as Brandon opened the door for me and helped me out like the queen I was. Then I stepped out with my triplets, my crown jewels. The silence that followed was deafening. I walked in slowly, my triplets holding my hands, their little matching outfits making them look like angels. I could feel the envy, the confusion, the awe burning in the eyes of every guest. Whispers filled the air. "Is that Jamal's ex-wife? Are those her kids? She looks amazing!" And I held my head up high, refusing to let my past define me. Then I saw him, Jamal. The look on his face was priceless. His jaw dropped, his eyes widened, and he froze as though he had just seen a ghost. Standing beside him was his new wife, holding her belly with pride. But even her smile faltered when she saw me step in like royalty. For a long moment, Jamal couldn't move. He stuttered, as though trying to find words, but nothing came out. His new wife tugged his arm, but he didn't even blink. The guests watched closely, waiting for his reaction. And in that silence, I felt something shift. Power. The same man who once mocked me was now speechless in front of me. Brandon joined me, placing his arm around my waist with pride. He shook Jamal's hand politely, as though nothing had ever happened between us. Then he kissed my forehead, looked at our children, and smiled at the crowd. The message was clear. I was not broken. I was loved, honored, and blessed. I sat with Brandon and my kids, enjoying the refreshments. People kept coming to compliment me, asking about the triplets and admiring how happy I looked. Meanwhile, Jamal and his wife sat stiff, their smiles forced, their confidence shattered. What was supposed to be their day of glory had turned into my day of vindication. Everywhere I turned, people whispered about how far I had come. Didn't Jamal leave her because she couldn't have kids? Now look at her, triplets and a Lamborghini. Some even avoided congratulating Jamal, too busy staring at me. And with every whisper, I could see Jamal sinking deeper into shame. At one point, Jamal tried to approach me. He smiled nervously and said, "Alicia, you look different."
His voice cracked. I looked at him with calm eyes and simply replied, "Yes, Jamal, I am different. God changed my story." And I turned back to my children, leaving him standing there speechless.
The rest of the shower was tense. Jamal tried to smile for pictures, but his eyes kept drifting back to me. His wife forced laughter, but her insecurity was written all over her face. I stayed only long enough to make my presence known, then told Brandon it was time to leave. As we walked out, Brandon opened the Lamborghini doors, and the crowd outside gasped again. My children waved their tiny hands, and I smiled. We didn't need to say anything more. Our exit spoke louder than any words could. The same woman Jamal threw away had left him humiliated in front of everyone he wanted to impress. Back at home, I sat quietly with Brandon, reflecting on the day. I wasn't proud of humiliating Jamal, but I felt a sense of justice. For years, I had been treated like nothing. Yet today, God had elevated me in front of the very people who once pitied me. It wasn't revenge, it was vindication. Meanwhile, Jamal's world began to crumble. Weeks after the baby shower, his wife gave birth to a baby girl. At first, he was overjoyed, posting pictures and calling himself the proud father. But little did he know his greatest humiliation was still coming. Not long after they brought the baby home, a strange man showed up at their door. He was tall, confident, and visibly upset. Jamal answered the door confused, while his wife's face turned pale the moment she saw him. The man's words shook him to his core. "That child is mine. I've been with your wife this whole time." Jamal's knees nearly gave out. He looked at his wife, his voice trembling. Is this true?" She burst into tears, unable to deny it. The room spun for him as his dreams of fatherhood collapsed right before his eyes. The baby he thought was his miracle wasn't his at all. The news spread like wildfire. Friends, family, and neighbors all learned that Jamal had been raising another man's child. People who once envied him now whispered behind his back. The respect he craved was gone, replaced by pity and shame. Jamal became a shadow of himself. He avoided social gatherings, stopped smiling, and drowned in regret. Everything he mocked me for came back to haunt him, only 10 times worse. His pride had destroyed him, and now he was left with nothing but bitterness. Meanwhile, my life blossomed. My children grew healthy and happy, Brandon's love never wavered, and our home overflowed with joy. Sometimes I would think back on Jamal, but never with hatred. I realized he was simply the tool God used to prepare me for the life I was truly meant to have. And so, here's what I've learned. Never let the cruelty of others make you believe you are worthless. People may mock you today, but tomorrow, God can elevate you beyond their imagination. Jamal invited me to his baby shower to shame me, but instead, he was the one disgraced. Life has a way of turning tables, and when God writes your story, it always ends in victory. After weeks of silence and depression, Jamal couldn't sleep anymore. The words of that man at his doorstep haunted him. That child is mine. He began to wonder if something was wrong with him. For the first time in his life, he questioned himself. Could I really be the problem? One morning, Jamal gathered the courage to visit the hospital. His hands shook as he filled out the forms, avoiding eye contact with anyone. He sat in the waiting room, surrounded by posters of happy families, feeling like a fraud. For years, he mocked me for being childless, but now he feared it had always been him. When the doctor called him in, Jamal could barely breathe. He explained his worries, his voice breaking as he admitted the truth for the first time. "Doctor, I've never had a child. My wife just gave birth, but someone claims the child is not mine. I need to know the truth about myself." The doctor asked about his medical history. Jamal hesitated, then mentioned an accident he had when he was 10. He had been hit hard while playing football, rushed to the hospital, and told he was lucky to be alive. But he never thought much about it after that. After several tests, Jamal waited in the office, his heart pounding. He prayed silently, begging for good news. But when the doctor returned with the results, his face was serious. Jamal's chest tightened. He already knew it wasn't good. The doctor sighed and said gently, "Jamal, the accident you had when you were young caused internal damage. I'm afraid you cannot father a child naturally." Those words struck Jamal like a thunderbolt. His mouth went dry. His whole world blurred. All those years, all that mocking, it was never her fault. Tears filled his eyes, but he couldn't cry in front of the doctor. He nodded silently and stumbled out of the hospital. Outside, he sat on a bench, staring into space. The truth crushed him. He had destroyed his marriage, humiliated his ex-wife, all while carrying the problem he accused her of. That night, Jamal finally broke down in his room. He screamed, he cried, he punched the walls. His wife avoided him, too guilty to comfort him. The baby cried in the crib, and Jamal turned his face away because deep down he knew that child was never his. In his darkest moment, Jamal thought about me. He remembered the nights I cried because of his words, the insults he threw, the way he paraded other women in my face. Regret stabbed his heart. She never deserved that. She was the best woman I ever had, and I lost her forever. Meanwhile, my life was still glowing. My children had just celebrated their second birthday, and Brandon threw a huge party. The house was filled with laughter, balloons, and love. As I held my son and daughters in my arms, I whispered a silent prayer of gratitude. God, thank you for rewriting my story. Friends and neighbors celebrated with us, praising how strong I had been and how far I had come. Some who knew my past couldn't stop shaking their heads. Alicia, look at you now. Only God could have done this. And I knew they were right. My story wasn't about revenge. It was about redemption. But Jamal's nights grew darker. He avoided people, ignored calls, and walked around like a ghost. The laughter of children outside pierced his soul like knives. Every giggle reminded him of what he could never have, and what he had thrown away when he lost me. One afternoon, Jamal's sister visited him. She begged him to eat, to take care of himself. But he snapped at her, shouting, "Leave me alone! Nobody understands me!" His anger wasn't really at her. It was at himself. Deep down, he knew he was the architect of his own downfall. Meanwhile, I received news of Jamal's condition. At first, I didn't believe it. The strong, proud man who once humiliated me was now broken, isolated, and childless. My heart didn't leap with joy. I actually felt pity for him because I knew what it felt like to be mocked and hopeless. Brandon noticed my silence and asked what was wrong. I told him about Jamal, and he simply said, "That's life, Alicia. What you sow is what you reap." But I couldn't help but pray for him in my heart, not because I wanted him back, but because I didn't want anyone, even Jamal, to end their life in despair. In time, Jamal's story became a warning to others. People whispered about how he mocked his ex-wife, only to discover he was the one who could never father a child. His pride destroyed him, and his cruelty came back to haunt him. His downfall became a lesson to the entire community. And me? I never stopped shining. Brandon's love grew stronger each day, and my children filled my world with laughter. I often shared my testimony with other women, especially those struggling to conceive, telling them, "Don't give up. Your delay is not denial. God can still rewrite your story." Years later, when I looked back at my journey, I realized something. Pain made me strong, humiliation made me humble, and rejection pushed me into my true destiny. Everything I went through was part of God's plan to show His glory in my life. Jamal, on the other hand, faded away from the spotlight he once craved. He lived quietly, burdened with regret. Some say he never recovered, while others say he found God late in life. But one thing was certain: he could never undo the damage his pride had caused. So here's my final word. Never mock someone for the battles they are fighting. You don't know what tomorrow holds. Jamal tried to disgrace me, but life turned the tables. When you put others down, you may be digging your own grave. But when you trust God, He will lift you higher than you ever imagined. Thank you so much for watching this emotional journey. Your support means the world to me. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss another powerful story.